We're told today's daf yomi is Sanhedrin Sadi Base, Sanhedrin 92. Today's daf is dedicated for a shmir for the Chayalim, itself for the Shviyim and a Yeshua for Am Yisrael. We're going to start on 91b, 4 lines from the bottom. Amar Rav Yehuda Marav Ko Hamonea Halacha Mipi Talmud Kilu Gozle Minacho Sabosef. Whoever does not teach halacha to a student, it's as though he's robbing from the inheritance of his fathers. As it says, Torah Tzivavanu Moshe, Morasha, Kilas Yaakov. The Torah was commanded to Moshe as an inheritance for the community of Jacob. Morasha, he will call Yisrael Misheshis Me Horatius. This was an inheritance or a heritage for the Jewish people from the 6 days of creation. If somebody doesn't teach Torah, it's like you're stealing their inheritance. And Amar Chana Bar Bizna, Amar Rabbi Shimon Chasida Kol Monei Halacha Mipi Talmud. If you don't teach the Torah to a student, Afil Ubrin Shebimei Imo Mekawan Olo. And even Mekawan Oso, then even the fetuses in the mother's womb will curse him. Meaning to say that since they're also learning Torah, even though they don't have a mouth, and so therefore they're also going to curse him. Shenemar, as it says in the verse, Monea bar. Now bar usually means like food, but here it's going to mean Torah. One who refrains from Torah, Yikuvu, what does that mean? Yikuvu usually means curse, and the Om Elu bar, and here Gemara says the Om means a fetus, as it says in Genesis, or Om no Om Yamatz. But with respect to Yaakov and Esav, it says that there always been a struggle. Well, Om means fetuses, because there is a reference to Yaakov and Esav being in the fetus. Then Kuva El Kloa, and the word Kuva means a curse, as it says Ma'akov or Kava El. It says by Bilam, how can I curse if God didn't curse? Vein Bar El Torah, and Bar here refers to Torah, as it says in the pasuk in Tehillim, Nash Kuvar Penya enough. So Ua Bar Yishmael Omer Minakbino So Kivra. If somebody doesn't teach Torah, you pierce him like a sieve. Ksivachi Kavu Yikvu Omu Ksivasam Vaikov Kor Bedoato. Amar Abaye the Ucho de Katri, this is like a sprinkler that they used to use to clean clothing. That's how it pierces many holes in it to distribute the water. That's what's going to happen to someone. But if he does teach Torah, what will be the reward? Will get receive blessings like Joseph, as it says, Ubracho Rosh Mashpir. It says there'll be a blessing on the head of the Mashpir. Mashpir is the provider, but here it means Joseph. It says, Yosef who shalit al aretz, who Mashpir kol am aretz. Amar Sheshes kol Lami Torah b'olam hazeh. Whoever teaches Torah in this world will merit to teach in the world to come. It says in the verse, it says, Umarveh gam hu yoreh. And Marveh can mean Torah study, can mean provider. Amarav, back to the topic of our chapter. How do we know there's resurrection of the dead from the Torah? Because it states, Yechi Ruvain va'ayamos. Yechi Ruvain bo'amazeh. Let Ruvain live in this world. Oh, Boker Tov. Today we're studying all our Torah is dedicated to the memory of Eric's mother on her yard site. Now his finger hut, Zechrono Livracha. So the topic we're talking about is the resurrection of the dead on the third yard site. So it says, Minayel Tchias Mesa Min Torah, 92a, around 10 lines from the top on 92a. It says, how do we know about the resurrection of the dead from the Torah? So Rava says, it says, Yechi Ruvain La'ayamos, Ruvain live in Ata, Yechi Ruvain Mohamad, Ruvain live in this world, La'ayamos, he won't die in Olam Haba, in the next world. Ravina says from here, Me'achad, V'la'abim Yoshne Admas Afer Yakitzu. It's from the book of Daniel. And the Rambam says that this is the most authoritative verse that proves the resurrection of the dead. from the Bible, because it says many from those who are sleeping on the ground will wake up. So Ela Chaye Olam, Ela Lecharfos Lidaron Olam. So some for eternal life and some for eternal scorn. That proves that people who are sleeping will wake up. There will be resurrection. Rav Ashi cites a verse from the last verse in the book of Daniel. It says, and you're going to go and you're going to rest, and then you're going to rise up again in the end of days. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Kol Parnos Shemani Gatzibor Benachas. Now, this is a message for us all. It says, Rabbi Elazar, any leader who leads the people benachas, yeah, with peace or with tranquility, zochel manhigam olam haba, will merit to lead them in the world to come. As it says, kimirachamim yinahagim v'amavui mayim yinahalim. One who is compassionate will lead them, and on springs of water he will guide them. Amar Boazar Gedola Dea. Dea here means knowledge. One who is seeking knowledge of God in this world. Gedola Dea, so great is, since we're saying statements of Rebbe Elazar, so that's why we're going into this tangent of other statements he made. So great is knowledge, Shenitna ben Shtei Osios, was given between two names of God. It says Kikel Deos Hashem. So Dea is between Kel and Hashem. Amar Belazar Gadol Mikdash, the temple is so great. Shenitna ben Shtei Osios was given between two names of God. As it says, Pulas Hashem Mikdash Hashem Korneliya Decha. And the Mikdash is between Maskef or Avada, so Parachinai, so El Me'ata Gedol Nekama. Why don't we say vengeance is so great? Shenitna ben Shtei Osios. That was also given between two names of God. But it says El Nekamos Hashem, El Nekamos Sophia. Amarei Lamil say, so he says, Amarei, so Rebbe Elazar says back to Rav Ada, Lamil say Hachinami, yeah. Sometimes you need vengeance. Sometimes you need to take the wrath out. What does it say on the Kama Sophia? What is the word Hofia, which means appear twice? One is to give you in a way that's a punishment. One is when revenge or vengeance or wrath from God is a payment of reward for the Jewish people. Anybody who has Deah and his knowledge, it's as though the temple was built in his whole lifetime. What a powerful idea, just to take a second. Rabbis were writing this in the years after the temple. They had no temple. And comes along Rebbe Elazar, he says, no, you can have the temple. The temple could be in your mind. Whoever has knowledge, it's as though the temple was built in his lifetime. Because both of them are pure between the names of God. Amar Elazar called Adam Sheish Podea Lasof Medash. Whoever's knowledge in the end will become wealthy, as it says, Uvadas Chadarim Yimu'u Kohon Yikar V'nai. Amar Elazar called Adam She'em Podea. If you don't have a life where you're seeking out knowledge of God, also Arachim Olav. It's prohibited to have compassion on him, as it says, Kilo Ambinosu. If you give bread to somebody who doesn't seek out knowledge, you stir him by him up. He's going to get affliction. As it states, it says your bread, they will place a mazor underneath you. What does that mean? There's no understanding. So if you give your bread to somebody who has no understanding, then it's going to be afflictions. As it states, Vayar Ephraim Eschal Yehuda es Mazarel. Remember, Rebbe Elazar called them Shem Bodeo Esof Goa. If you don't have a search for knowledge, in the end you'll go into exile. It says, L'chein Goa Mi Bibui Das. Remember, Rebbe Elazar called by Shein Divrei Torah Nishman Bo B'Layla. If you have a house, there's no words of Torah at night. Eish Ochol so fire will consume it. As it states, Kol Choshech Tamun L'Tfunav Tocho Eish Lo Nufach Yera Srid Ba'olo. And Ein Srid El Tamacham. The Srid refers to Torah scholar. As it states, Uvesridim Asher Hashem Korei. V'Omer Rabbi Elazar kol she'eino mahaneh talmid chachamim min yachasav eino roeh simin bracha la'olam. Whoever does not benefit Torah scholars from his assets will not see a blessing for eternity. As it states, Ein srid l'achol kein lo yachil tuvo. Ein srid el talmid chachamim. And the word srid refers to Torah scholars. Says, "V'sridim asher Hashem koreh." Remember, Rabbi Elazar kol she'eino mishayer pas al shulchanu. Whoever doesn't leave bread on his table, you have to leave a little bit of bread on your table at the end of your meal. Why? So one is in case poor people come, they have something to eat, and also you don't want to be gluttonous. So kol she'eino mishayer pas al shulchanu. We'll never see a blessing. It says, "Ein tzri l'chol, kein lo yachil tuvo." V'amar Rabbi Elazar, kol mishayer pasisim al shulchanu. Whoever leaves over the bread on his table, I thought this is the opposite, says Rebbe Lazar. He says two statements that are opposite. The first one, he states that if you don't leave over bread, you're not going to see a blessing. But then the second statement says, whoever leaves over bread on his table, it's like they're worshiping idolatry. It says, so one verse it says it's the way to do it, and the other verse says it's idolatry. So one is where you bring out a full loaf next to it. If you bring out a full loaf, that's a way of worshiping idolatry. If you don't bring out the full loaf, then it's a siman bracha. So what is machov pediburo? So machov pediburo is somebody who just tries to change his speech and disguise himself so people don't recognize him, like a spy. So anybody who's machov pediburo, it's ki'u oved avodah. It's like they're worshiping idolatry because it says here va'isi beinav kimtateya, v'ksiv asam kol ema ma'aseh tituim. So we see the first verse is a reference to Jacob disguising himself, and the second verse is a reference to idolatry. So we see that if you are on a mitatea, it's like you're worshiping idolatry. Remember, Rabbi Elazar called mistakel be'erva. Whoever looks at erva, looks at inappropriate things. Kashto nina eres. His bow will be weakened. That means he'll lose his ability to produce children. As it states, area ta'or kashtacha. Rabbi Elazar olam avekibel v'kiyem. A person should always be humble. Rabbi Zera afanan nami tanina. We have a source for this. Because it says about the mitzora, if you have leprosy on your house, you have to go into the house and look at the house and look at the leprous mark and then say that it's saras. But let's say it's a bayis afa, let's say it's a dark house that you can't see it. You're not required to open the windows to see the afflictions because it's carrying itself in a humble way, and so therefore the house is able to remain. So Shema Mina. Amrav Tivi, Amar Rabbi Yoshai, Maidel Sev. What about the fact that it says in the verse in Proverbs, Sheol v'otzer rachim eretz? So this is the verse in Proverbs. So a kever is so Sheol refers to a grave, and otzer rachem. The Otzer Rechem refers to the womb, which is narrow. So these ideas, Sha'ol, Otzer Rechem, and Eretz, Lo Savamayim. This is the verse that a grave and a womb and the land, they don't want water. What does that refer to? Rashi says that a grave doesn't want too much dead, and the womb does not want too much activity, and the eretz and the land does not want water. So, what do we do with this verse? Why is the verse comparing a grave to a womb? It's like a womb. The woman's womb has things going in and going out. Also, a grave has people coming in and going out. So the resurrection is dead. So just like the woman's womb that it enters into it secretly, but when it comes out, it's a big tumult. Sha'ol, a grave, shemachnisabo b'kol. When they bring the body in, it's a big tumult. Holocaust. For sure, when it leaves, it'll be the big tumult. This is a refutation of those who say there's no resurrection of the dead from the Torah. Tana Debei Eliyahu, the Tana Debei Eliyahu taught. Who is the Tana from the Academy of Eliyahu? So the Be'er Sheva says this is not Eliyahu Navi, but this is a Tana whose name is Eliyahu. But the Chidah says that that's a difficult explanation. So the Chidah says this is a reference to Eliyahu Navi. Tzadikim sha'ased HaKadosh Baruch Hu achyosan ina choser laf. So this Tan of Eliyahu says the righteous will be resurrected, will not die again. As it says, Vayan Yeshar b'Tzion v'Nosar b'Yerushalayim Kadosh Yeyamar lo kol kosov l'chayim b'Yerushalayim. As it says in Isaiah that they will live. Ma Kadosh Olam, just like God is eternal. Ma Kadosh Olam Kayim. Afim Olam. So to the righteous will last eternally. On the top of 92b. Bim Tomar, Osan Shanim, so the God is going to renew the world, and then the world will be desolate for 1,000 years, Rashi says. We're going to get to that, God willing, in Daf Tzadi 7. So those righteous people who are resurrected, where will they go? They're not going to be buried in the land. So since they're resurrected and you're saying they're living forever, so what's going to happen to them? It says, "V'niskav Hashem avadu b'yom ha'od." So tzadikim, ma'ayin osin. What are the righteous going to do? So the Gemara says, "HaKadosh Baruch Hu oseh lahem knafim k'nesharim." God will make them wings like a nesher is usually an eagle or a big giant vulture. Meshatin al pnei hamayim, and they're going to fly over the water. As it says, "Alkein lo nira ba'amir eretz b'mot harim b'leiv yamim." So, meaning to say that when God updates the world and the mountains and the world become dry, don't be afraid because they will be able to fly above it. Shema Tomar Yesh Lam Tsar, unless you say, okay, they're going to have distress. Tamomer v'kovei Hashem yachifu koach yalu aver k'nesharim yarutzu v'lo yigo yelchu v'lo yafu. No, they're not going to be tired. For Nalef, so the Gemara says, but why don't we learn it out? We mesim sheyechya yecheskel. Why don't we learn about the dead, that they'll go back and die, because that's what happened to the dead that Ezekiel spoke about. Rashi says that Ezekiel's dead went back and died. So too the tzaddikim that will be resurrected will go back and die. So Rashi says, this is what I heard. And what happened to Ezekiel? Nebuchadnezzar, Rashi tells us, exiled Ezekiel with Yechaniah, the king of Judah. That was before Tzidkiyahu, so that was the first exile, 11 years before the destruction of the temple. And Yechezkel was prophesying in Babylonia, and Jeremiah was in Eretz Yisrael in those 11 years that Tzidkiyahu reigned. So that's what Rashi tells us. So why don't we learn it out from the dead of Ezekiel? So he says, no. The reason why we don't want to say that is because the Tana who says that to live forever holds like the position that Ezekiel's prophecy was be'emes mashal haya, which the Gemara is going to say it was a parable. We'll see how they explain the words. That meaning to say that it never happened. It was just a vision that God showed him, but it never actually happened. The Tanya Rebbe Eliezer Omer, the Eliezer taught, what happened to these dead who Ezekiel resurrected? Amdu al ragleim, they stood on their legs, Amru Shira, and they sang songs of praise. Umesu, and then after they sang the songs of praise, they died. Ma Shira Amr, what songs do they say? They say Hashem Memis B'Tzedek U'Ma'achaya B'Rachman. That God causes those to die. It's righteous, but He resurrects them with compassion. And then after they said that, they died. So, first of all, some say we learn from here that when you sing songs to God, you have to stand. Rabbi Shua Amar Shirazu Amru Hashem Memis Mechayim Marich Ovial. That it's all up to God. God brings us down to death and resurrects us as well. Rabbi Yehuda Omer MS Mashal Haya. Rabbi Yehuda says, in truth, this was a parable. And Amar Rabbi Nechemia Im MS Lama Mashal. If it's true, why is it a parable? Vim Mashal Lama MS. So if it's a parable, it's not true. If it's true, it's not a parable. So he says, no, what is it? Ela be'emes mashalaya. In truth, it was a parable. Rabbi Eliezer ben Noach, Rabbi Yosef Glili, Omer Mesim She'ech Yecheskel, O Eretz Yisrael. No, these dead who Ezekiel resurrected, they went up to the land of Israel. V'nasu nashim, they married. V'olidu banim ubanos, and they gave birth to children. Amar Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Aragov, Rabbi Yehuda ben Meser stood on his feet. He said, "Ani me b'nei banim alalu." I am from these grandchildren of these people who were resurrected by Ezekiel, who then went up to the land of Israel and married these women. I'm their grandchild. V'alo tefillin she'inichi avi abba ahem. And this is the tefillin that my grandfather left me from them. So this were from those people who were resurrected, and that tells us that the greatest legacy we could have from the dead is a spiritual legacy. And that's why he's pointing to the fact that this is his tefillin. Who are these dead who Ezekiel resurrected? Amarav Elu b'nei Ephraim. So Rav says this refers to the children of Ephraim, Manu Akates, that they were in the exile in Egypt, and they counted the time when it would be the exile, when it was supposed to be the end of the exile in Egypt, of the servitude, but they made a mistake. They made a mistake. Rashi tells us how they made the mistake. Rashi says, because they counted from the moment of the decree, but they should have counted from only when Isaac was born. But they counted from the time that God spoke to Abraham. Therefore, they miscalculated. So that's all our problems. That's why the Ego Azav happened, that people miscalculated when Moshe was going to come up. Anyway, going back to our Gemara, as it states, to Bnei Ephraim, Shu Selach, Uberan, Ubeno, V'tachas Beno, V'el Ada, Beno, V'tachas Beno, V'zevet Beno, V'shesach Beno, V'ezer Elad, V'aragum Anshe, Gat, Ano Adim Ba'aretz. So the people of Gat is in current day Gaza, they killed them. Uksiv V'yisabo, Ephraim Avim, Yamim Rabim, V'yavo, Echav V'nachamo, came to comfort him. And since they were killed when they left Egypt, and it wasn't time of redemption, therefore God resurrected them in the time of Ezekiel. So basically, even though they died because they went out too early, they were the first ones who were resurrected. Shows us that sometimes if your dream isn't achieved right away, eventually don't give up on the dream. Eventually it'll be achieved. Shmuel Amar Elu b'nei Adam shekafer b'tchias hamesim. Who was the one who Ezekiel resurrected? Those who rejected resurrection, as it says, after they were resurrected. Ezekiel says, "Vayomer Eli ben Adam, atzamos Ela kol beis Yisrael himar." These bones from all of Israel. Hinei omrim, you have shuat moseinu abda tikfatenu nigzeralenu. They said our bones have dried and we've lost our hope. And God said to me, basically, these bones are a sign for all of Israel. Ezekiel said that just like these dead who rejected the resurrection and said we lost our hope, and after we died, it was decreed upon us that we should be cut off forever. And now these dead know that I am resurrecting the dead. So too in the future, all of Israel will rise up for the resurrection. This refers to the people who don't have any even moisture of a mitzvah. It says, that these dry bones heard the word of God. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha Amar El Bnei Adam Shechifu Es HaEichel. These were the people who covered up the Eichel entirely with shkatzim and ramasim, that they worshipped idolatry. It says, "Vavo ve'rev hinei kol tabnis remetz ubeima sheketz kol gilu beis Yisrael mechuka al kir saviv." And it says, "Ksav hazam avirani aleim saviv saviv." So therefore, it says that God brought His Spirit on those people who said saviv. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Elo Mesim Shebebikas Dura. These refer to the dry bones were in the valley of Dura that Nebuchadnezzar ruled over when the Jewish people were exiled. Amar Rabbi Yochanan Minar Eshel Ad Rabbas Bikas Dura. Rabbi Yochanan says from the river of Eshel until the place called Rabbas is the valley of Dura. Nebuchadnezzar Rasha Israel, when Nebuchadnezzar exiled the Jewish people. There were some people there who were so beautiful that the sun was diminished in their presence. Dios, and then the women of Nebuchadnezzar's people rose the sun. They would see them as shofos zavos, and their whole bodies would be flowing. Amru, they said to their husbands, they told their husbands about how beautiful these people were. Baaliyel Melch, the king, their husbands told the king, V'tziva Melch Fargum, the king commanded them to die. But dying on shofos zavos, it didn't stop their bodily reactions. So God caused them to be trampled. And those people were the ones Ezekiel brought back to life. When Nebuchadnezzar threw Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah into the fire, God said to Ezekiel, go resurrect the dead in the valley of Dura. Someone, once Ezekiel resurrected them, the bones came and smacked Nebuchadnezzar on his face. Amar, Nebuchadnezzar says, what are they doing? Amru, whoa. The servant said, these are friends of Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And Mechaye Mason, the friends of Ezekiel, and he's the friend of Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and he's resurrecting the dead in Bikas Torah. So Nebuchadnezzar recognized that it was coming from God. So Pasach ve'Amar, he opened up and he said, praise to God. He said, Asui Kama Rav. The letters of God's name, how great they are. The Tamoi Kama Tekifin, and his actions are indeed great. Machusei Machus Alam v'Shaltonei Am Dor Dor. His kingdom will reign forever, and his rulership will be forever generation. Amar B'Yitzchak Yitzchak Ze'av Roseach L'Soch Piv Shalos Rasha. For it was a curse, and it was appropriate to pour like manure into his mouth. Shel Moe Ba Malach L'Sataro Al Piv, were enough for the fact that an angel came and stopped Nebuchadnezzar from continuing. Bikesh Lagano is called Shir Sishpachos Shamar David. You continue to say praises to such a degree that it would be even greater than all the Psalms of David. Shamar David B'Sefer Tehillim, because it would be even more beautiful. The day that Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were resurrected, there were 6 miracles done. Safa Kivshan, the furnace floated up for everybody to see. Nifratz Kivshan, the furnace broke for everyone to see. Humal Sodo, the foundation of the Kivshan melted away. The Nepach Tzelam Alpanav, and their golden idol in the furnace turned over. V'nisrafu Arba Malchios, and the 4 kingly people that came to help Nebuchadnezzar were burnt. And Ezekiel resurrected the dead in the valley of Dura. V'kul, Gemara, all of them are tradition. But the 4 kingly people helped Nebuchadnezzar is a verse. Nebuchadnezzar, the king, sent to gather up he gathered up these people to come to the dedication of the altar that Nebuchadnezzar was establishing. And then it says over there that the servants of Nebuchadnezzar informed about Hananiah Mishtachel Vazari that they didn't bow down to the idol, and they threw them in the fire. And only four of them were then, it said that they were there. These only four advisors. To see these men. So we see from here that there were the four kings, who were also burned. Tani the Rebbe Lazar ben Yaakov, Afilu b'shas takana ishana this Adam et atzom et Rabbanu Shalom. Even when you're in danger, don't take off your clothing, as it says. Badin gvurin lech. Then these people kaftu b'sarboyam patshon v'karbulasan, because it says that they tied themselves from the garments and they were thrown into the fire. So we see the Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were wearing these garments of glory when they were thrown into the fire. Okay, we'll stop here. Today's daf for Big Shkoyach.